We are currently in the 2026 award season, and it's got me thinking about last year's award season, where there was no bigger talking point than Emilia Pérez. The film was well received at festivals by audiences and critics alike, but upon its wide release, the film's reputation plummeted. I mean, just look at this Letterboxd rating curve. There was a time when the average was around a 3.5. This hatred was amplified when the film received the record-breaking 13 Oscar nominations, the most nominations for a non-English language film. As a result, people who normally would never have even heard about Emilia Pérez started talking about it. It was a huge mess, but as soon as award season was over and Emilia Pérez picked up 2 Oscars, people began forgetting about the film. There was a moment where Emilia Pérez was the most talked about thing in the world. But fast forward a year later and nobody cares. Except me. And that's why I'm here. I'm here to revisit Emilia Pérez. I first saw the film in December of 2024. At the time, the film was controversial but not mainstream yet. And it was generally considered a decent film at the time. My opinion, I thought it was pretty mediocre. I enjoyed the first 40 minutes or so, but felt like the film lost a lot of momentum after that. I found the film technically well made, but I felt like it could have explored its themes a bit better. And as for the musical elements, I found them pretty hit or miss. Ultimately, I didn't really care for or about the film. Fast forward a bit, and I find out that the film is considered offensive in the Mexican community. Apparently the film heavily misrepresents their culture, and of course that is not okay. The director, Jacques Audiard, is French and admitted to not doing much research on Mexican culture. Plus, this film's cast and crew apparently didn't consist of any Mexicans in general. I am certainly not here to defend that. What I will say, however, is that it doesn't really affect my viewing experience. Since I'm not familiar with Mexican culture, these aren't things that I noticed when watching the film. But they are certainly worth mentioning, and I will criticize Jacques Audiard for not doing enough research. And if he really wanted to be lazy, he could have just put a disclaimer at the start of the film that says the following takes place in a fictionalized version of Mexico, or something like that. But of course he didn't, so that's lame. Another major controversy that came out of this film is the lead actress, Carla Sofia Gascon. I won't get into much detail, but she made some horrible tweets, and I think it's a shame that she, of all people, is the first transgender actress to get nominated for an Oscar. What should have been a beautiful moment got tainted. Nevertheless, that doesn't change how I view her performance in this film, but it does change how I view her as a person. And I'm sure I don't need to tell you how this added more fuel to the flame that was the hatred of Emilia Pérez. All around, it was a disaster, even though the film did end up winning 2 Oscars. Best Supporting Actress for Zoe Saldana and Best Song for El Mal. And after that, nobody ever spoke about Emilia Pérez again. Until now. Like I said, this current award season has got me thinking about last year's award season, and suddenly I just got the itch to rewatch Emilia Pérez. Because while I remembered the film being flawed, I also remembered it having some good elements. And I must say, after rewatching Emilia Pérez, I kinda liked it. Put down your pitchforks, okay? It's not 2025 anymore, we can be civil about this. In this video, I'm gonna describe what I like and what I dislike about this film, and why I ultimately think it's actually pretty good. Okay? Let's be peaceful. Let's have a respectful discussion. So where do we begin? How about the music? Something people say about Emilia Pérez is that it's a musical with 0 good songs. And while I personally disagree, I can totally see where those people are coming from. The music in this film is unorthodox. Songs begin and end seemingly at random, and they don't follow traditional structures. I can see why that would be off-putting to people. In fact, it doesn't always work for me either, but it was absolutely done on purpose. The film was intended as an anti-musical. A musical where the songs are unpredictable and rough around the edges. If you're going into this film expecting something like Wicked, you're in the wrong place. And that's totally fair. But let's not critique this film for not succeeding at being something it's not even trying to be. You certainly don't have to like it, but let's not put this film on the same playing field as something like Wicked. They're 2 completely different films. But what exactly do I like about the music in Emilia Pérez? Well, for the most part, I believe the songs have an intimate feel to them, and they do a good job at pushing the story forward, or at least providing a glimpse into the mindset of the characters. I like how the songs have an unscripted feel to them, and how they exist in an almost dreamlike space. Now, I'm certainly not an expert on music, but I enjoyed the melodies as well as the raw vocal performances. To be clear, not every song worked for me. For example, I wasn't a big fan of what Selena Gomez was doing, which is funny because she's easily the best singer out of the bunch. But for the most part, I found the music pretty fitting, even though it's not the type of music that I would listen to on its own. And before anyone mentions the man to woman, woman to man song, I think it's pretty obvious that the song is meant to be obnoxious. Again, that doesn't mean you have to like it, but let's not pretend it's trying to be something it's not. Anyway, let's move on from the music, because I don't have much more to say about it than I thought it was pretty good. However, that's very subjective. What isn't very subjective is the sound design. I love how you can hear the characters interacting with their environments even during the musical sequences. In most musicals, it feels like the songs were recorded beforehand and the actors are simply lip-syncing to it. And that's totally fine, but I love the attention to detail in Emilia Pérez. You can hear everything, not just the music. It creates for a very immersive experience. The choreography, production design, and camera work also add to that immersion. The film is visually beautiful all around, and I don't think many people would argue against that. The theatrical lighting in particular is one of my favorite aspects of this entire film. The entire film feels very much like a stage play, which makes sense because the film was envisioned as a play. Perhaps it would have been better received in that format, I have no idea. On my first viewing of Emilia Pérez, my main issue with the film was that I felt it lost a lot of narrative momentum in its second half. And while I still do believe that to be true, it's no longer as big of an issue as it was before. In my opinion, the first 45 minutes or so of this film are tremendous. They set the stage, and most of my favorite songs take place during that time. However, the second half is where the film starts focusing more heavily on the crime stuff as opposed to the personal stuff. Both aspects are interesting in their own ways, and both are present throughout the entire film, but I'm definitely more interested in the personal stuff, which is a bit more heavily focused on in the first half of the film. The second half is also where the runtime starts feeling a bit heavy. You could have easily trimmed at least 10 minutes of runtime. But unlike on my first viewing, this time I was able to enjoy both halves of the film, even though I do have my preference. Performance-wise, I mostly have good things to say about this film. Zoe Saldana won the Oscar for Best Supporting Actress, and while I wouldn't have picked her myself, it certainly wasn't a bad win by any means. She really pours her energy into this role, and I don't think it's crazy to call it her best performance. Carla Sofia Gascon plays the titular Emilia Pérez, and while she does seem like a pretty terrible person, I can't deny that her performance in this film is great. She genuinely embodies Emilia Pérez, and I can't imagine anyone else giving this performance. And while I wish she was a better person, I'm happy we can finally say that an openly trans person has been nominated for an acting award at the Oscars, not counting Elliot Page of course because he hadn't transitioned at the time. Out of this film's 3 lead women, I do believe Selena Gomez is the weak link. Not because she's bad or anything, I just don't have many thoughts on her performance in general. To be fair, she wasn't really given much to work with in the first place. Another common critique with this film is that it represents the trans community in a negative light. I don't really see how that's the case. Sure, the character of Emilia Pérez is trans and a bad person, but those two things don't really have much to do with each other. It's not like the film is saying that trans people are bad. If anything, I find it refreshing that this film treats Emilia Pérez like a complex human being as opposed to just a trans person. That may seem like the bare minimum, and I wish it was, but unfortunately, it's not that obvious. Most trans characters in media are portrayed as very one-dimensional. Emilia Pérez is not that. And to the people who complain about how they feel like the character of Emilia Pérez was redeemed by the end of the film, I strongly disagree. This is getting into spoilers, but she was still a bad person when she died. Just because she did some good deeds and was celebrated by the community doesn't mean that she was redeemed as a person. The community had no idea of the terrible things that she had done. They were simply celebrating the Emilia Pérez that they were familiar with. I suppose I could do a deeper plot breakdown, but I don't want to go that far. I'm just here to give you my surface level thoughts, and in my opinion, the film itself doesn't celebrate Emilia Pérez as a person. What else is there to say really? I feel like I've covered most of it. The film is very atypical and provocative, and it confuses me when people refer to it as Oscar bait. This is not Oscar bait. Green Book is Oscar bait. But I suppose it did get a lot of Oscar nominations, way more than I would have given it. Because even though I like Emilia Pérez, I don't think it's a masterpiece by any means. But I also don't understand the visceral hatred it has received. Don't get me wrong, there are plenty of reasons to hate Emilia Pérez, but I feel like the hate it got was a bit overblown. I'm not one to accuse people of bandwagoning, but I feel like there was a little bit of bandwagoning going on. Again, plenty of valid reasons to hate Emilia Pérez, but the amount of people doing it, I don't know man. Anyway, those are my thoughts. I went from being pretty indifferent on Emilia Pérez to actually liking it quite a lot, though not quite loving it. I give it a solid 7 out of 10. See you next time.